Do you have a calling? Do you lie awake at night wishing that you could share some truth with others that could make the world a better place? If you do, you probably also tell yourself 1,000 reasons why you can't, like, it's too expensive to start a podcast, I don't have any equipment, I don't think I could make any money doing it. Now, all those excuses are gone. With Anchor.fm, you can record, edit, master, and distribute your podcast all from one simple and easy-to-use mobile app. Here at Bad Science Fiction Read Poorly, we looked at many other expensive paid services to work with, and after an extensive amount of research, we decided that Anchor was still the best service for us. Here's why. It's completely free. The only equipment that you need is your phone or a computer. You can always record on professional equipment as well, and simply upload it to the website. Anchor will distribute it on every major podcast service, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many, many more. Most importantly, Anchor will find you sponsors, and you can start getting paid right away. Don't tell yourself that you're not important enough. With Anchor, you can start right now. Download the free Anchor app or go to Anchor.fm to get started. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Bad Science Fiction Read Poorly. I am Dick.
And I'm Jay.
And I'm proud to introduce a wonderful guest for you today. This is Aalok.
Thank you so much, Jay and Dick, for having me. It's real fun to be on your show.
And we're really excited to have you here. Aalok is a screenwriter and has many projects out there, and he also has been doing several very successful podcasts. Would you like to tell us a little bit about them?
Sure, yeah. So the first podcast I ever created is called The Afflatus. Essentially, it's me interviewing my friends who have had an interesting journey in their career of becoming who they are right now. And as the show kind of progressed, I've been able to stretch that beyond the boundaries of my social circle and have more people be on the show and share their stories. So yeah, I've had some pretty interesting guests over the years. For season 2 of The Afflatus, so like we just finished season 1 of The Afflatus, which had 100 episodes. Now we are getting into season 2, and of course that won't be 100 episodes long. It will be more like 15. But I'm pretty excited about that because for season 2 we have a reality show winner, we have a Guinness World Record holder, and we have award-winning actors and photographers. So it would be interesting to kind of share their journey with my listeners. And we are also creating the Spanish and Arabic version of the podcast. So of course, I don't speak Spanish and Arabic, but there will be another native speaker who knows these languages, and they will interview along the same lines, professionals and artists from these regions like Latin America or Middle East, and highlight their journey to kind of build audience there. So that's the first podcast, which has now turned into a franchise. There's another podcast that we just concluded. It was a mini series called Millennial Things. It's essentially just 3 friends talking about stuff that millennials talk about, like travel and food and entrepreneurship and dating and stuff like that. So that was fun. It was just 5 episodes, but we had a great time. And currently I'm working on another podcast called Love Without Borders. It's a podcast that highlights the stories of couples who have had a rather difficult journey of being with each other. So for example, there's this couple that has immigration issues. So like the girl is from Colombia and the guy is from the US, and they both were friends first, then they fell in love. But now, of course, with like the whole immigration issues due to current administration, it's kind of like difficult for them to be with each other. So they are trying to figure out like legal ways to make this thing work. Yeah, there are a lot of stories like that, and I like, not get into too much detail right now because I can go on forever. But yeah, these are some of the projects that I'm currently working on.
Wonderful. Now, you also mentioned before that you were working on, that you've worked on a lot of short stories in the past, or I should say video shorts. Could you tell us some more about the screenwriting that you've been doing?
Yeah, sure. So the screenwriting was something that, I picked up out of this desire to tell the stories that I always wanted to tell. It's one thing to be a producer and produce other people's story, but I think at some point you start realizing that, okay, now that I am producing these movies and short films for like other people, might as well take that opportunity to also share some of the stories that I want to share. So that's how I got into it. And I think over the years, I have kind of built the confidence to move just from writing short films to now writing feature length screenplays. And currently, I'm working on a feature length screenplay called Looking Back Once More, which is essentially about a guy who has a prank decides to play a prank on his girlfriend, and things get out of hand and he gets locked out in a different country, and eventually decides to assume a new identity and move forward from there. And it's that journey of like how he falls in love with his girlfriend and then decides to play a prank, things get out of hand, and then he assumes a new identity. It's a whole, like, it's a nice love story kind of weaved into this larger serious themes.
That sounds wonderful.
Yeah, fantastic.
I only have one more question before we get started here. We were talking a little bit before the show, and you mentioned the path that it took you to the job that you're doing right now was actually very interesting. Could you tell us what you went to school for, maybe a little bit about where you grew up? Kind of tell us the story that got you to where you are today.
So I grew up in Mumbai, India, and I come from a family of entrepreneurs. So everybody in my family is an entrepreneur. So my mom, my dad, my uncle, my grandfather, aunt, everyone. So I grew up in that environment. So entrepreneurship is something that was very natural to me. But the only thing was that everyone in my family is a dropout entrepreneur. Nobody went to like a big college or a big school or picked up these skills. They just did it out of like the need to survive, and just on instincts. So my dad was really particular about sending me to a good school. Fortunately, I made it to Harvard somehow. My background, I did my undergrad in accounting and finance, and my first job was with JP Morgan in investment banking. But of course, there's only so much you can work, like those long hours and at the expense of your social life. So I felt like, okay, I need to change that. But fast forward a couple of years, I'm on Harvard campus having coffee with a friend who is a filmmaker, and she essentially convinced me that all these stories that you tell from your childhood and like your funny experiences of moving to the US and how you went about that. I think it would be interesting for people to see it. So why don't you pursue storytelling? And at that point, I had not done any creative work in my life, so I was really skeptical. But she had a script and she said, I just need a producer. I had some savings with me. We produced the film. It did really well. And then I realized that, okay, filmmaking or any kind of storytelling is not rocket science. I mean, of course, there is discipline and talent required, but you can do it. So yeah, that's when I kind of felt that, okay, if I stay at it, then eventually I'll be able to be successful in it. I had a friend who said that, yeah, let's start a media company in New York City, which we did in 2018. And a couple of years later, we have produced, I think, 5 short films so far. I have written 4 of them and directed 2 of them. And currently we are working on our feature-length screenplay, as I said. But we also have like 6 podcasts going on at the same time. Business is doing well.
Well, it sounds that you're very proud of finding what makes you happy, and that's something that we should all be really hoping that we can do with ourselves as well. Well, we're going to move over and transition a little bit into the show. For any new listeners that we might have for this episode, Jay, why don't you walk us through the process we're going to go through for the rest of this show?
All right, absolutely. So, bad science fiction read poorly. We're going to we're going to select our writing prompts at random using a few different randomly generated prompts. We're going to spend about 4 hours writing, and we're going to read each other's stories at first glance. There's no peeking, right when we sign everything up on the air, is right when we read it. And then we talk about it. So just as kind of as a reminder, if you like Bad Science Fiction Read Poorly, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you hear our show. So who's going first?
Well, I was just thinking, and we can spitball a little bit on some ideas here on something that would really kind of fitting for this interview that we're just having with Aalok joining us. And you said that you actually got a degree in economics is your main subject area. And I had an interesting thought while you were talking about accounting and the issues at work. What if a general theme might be money problems? Just leaving it completely open-ended, not necessarily like you need to get money, but just problems we might have with making money. That could be our general angle from that. What do you both think about that?
Yeah, I think, it's interesting that you brought that up, because my first attempt at writing ever was along the lines of economics, where it wasn't necessarily money problems, but it was kind of this dystopian future where the prison system has been eliminated, and the severity of your crime is how long you work unpaid. So it's like if you kind of committed low level forgery, you'll have to work for in prison, of course in a guarded system, but there are no bars as such. So in a guarded system, you have to work for a couple of days. If you murdered a child, then you have to do that for 15 years. And how
hopefully more than 15.
Yeah, this was again we don't know how the dystopian future is, but I just thought more than 15 for sure. Yes, but long periods of time is what I meant. But and essentially it would be something out of this there is a murder that happens, and a person is sort of put in this facility, but then realizes that he was framed for it, and then he goes on the quest to figure out what happened and who is conspiring against him, and discovers a underground resistance movement that was planning all this whole thing so that he can eventually become the leader. It sounds a bit like Terminator, but I mean, that was my first
well, now that you said it,
shot at.
Now that you said the story, nobody can use it now. So that's good. But there's lots of ways we could talk about. Now, I'm just thinking about in that story. What if somebody commits a crime and they're just completely useless at work? So the amount of work that they do for a job actually makes it harder on everybody else. If that makes the sentence longer or not. But anyway, sorry. All right, we won't parse down those ideas, but it could be any type of thing, maybe an issue of in the future, how do you go and decide on what job you're going to be, or, hey, if you're in the future and you need $20 to take a girl out on a date, what's the solution you're going to have? Lots of different options. Jay, what do you think? Could we go with that, or do you want to go a different direction?
Okay, so an overarching theme. Money problems. So they could be anything from
any type of problems.
So any type of money problem, from large scale, large umbrella institutional, all the way down to needing $20
Bitcoin.
to take somebody out for a date. So yeah, okay. Okay. All right. I'm on board.
Okay. And we can just use that as a big general. So how about this? Since let's let our guest go first, and we'll just all three go in order for each of the decisions. So what should we do? Should we pick the year first?
Yeah, let's go ahead and pick the year.
So, Aalok, what we'll do is we'll give you 3 dates, and you pick which one of the 3 you like the best.
Okay.
The first year is 4806.
All right.
4860.
No, 06.
Oh, 06. 4806.
The next one.
I'm not dyslexic, I promise. Maybe I am.
5079.
Oh, okay.
It's like the most bizarre lottery numbers you could ever pull, right?
It's almost like they do it on purpose to mess with us, but
And then 0259.
Wow.
Science fiction in the past about money problems. We'll go with aliens on that one if you want.
Yeah, I mean,
Take your pick.
I think 4806 sounds good to me, because I think I can extrapolate some of the present scenarios regarding money and economics to that time frame.
All right.
Jay, why don't you go next?
All right, I will. 5947. First selection here. You know.
So the near distant future.
Yeah, the nearer than we have done it in the past distant future. 3787.
That's a good date.
And yeah, that kind of looks like a future movie, like a future date movie number, like when they sit there and go the year 1997, because you know everything apparently happened in the year 1997 for a while in science fiction movies.
Yeah, back in the 80s.
Yes, and then the year 1865.
Ooh,
Interesting.
this is gonna be a tough one to write.
I'm gonna go with 3787, and while I'll be honest, 1865 definitely piqued my curiosity. I was like, that might be fun, but let's. I'm gonna play it a little safe today. I'm not feeling as adventurous as I normally.
So
would
I'm
be.
going to ask a very important question before you roll for me. Has my ban on space westerns been lifted yet?
Well, do you want your ban on space westerns to be lifted?
We'll
yet?
see how we'll see how the chips lie. Okay, just so in case I pick the right year for this.
All right, Dick. So your first number is 2249.
2249 is probably what I'm going to go with, no matter what. But okay, 2249, I like it.
That's close enough in the future. That'd be. The second one is 6595.
6595, I don't want.
Okay.
Might as well just write regular fiction at that point.
The third number is 0926.
Oh.
0926. That's really close to like two other episodes I wrote. You know what? I'm going to go with the original number. What was it?
2249.
2249. So I'll be writing about events that people would actually remember the present who are in them. All right, that sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So now for our random genre generator, we usually, we have three generated, and then we pick one, or we can be a little loose on this one. So in other words, if you see a great opportunity to like combine, to kind of meld two of these genres, it's fine. You don't have to like purely be stuck with it. So without further ado, let's go ahead and selections.
Genre?
There we go. Yeah, genre selection.
Here we go.
As I'm staring at it, by the way.
Genre, what's that?
Yeah. Oh, God. So the first is horror.
Oh, interesting.
Yes. The second is romantic comedy. And the third is occult.
Ooh.
Occult?
Yes. That would be kind of like stories about like witchcraft and stuff like
okay.
that.
Oh, okay. So like Scientology,
Or
but in future.
And secret groups, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Interesting. I'll probably go with rom-com.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds fun. All right, Jay, what are yours?
So we have philosophical drama.
Philosophical drama. Can you explain that to me, Jay?
No, I can't.
We might need to Google that.
Yeah, let's see what a philosophical drama. Philosophical fiction refers to the class of works of fiction which devote a significant portion of their content to the sort of questions normally addressed in philosophy. These might include the function of role in society, the purpose of life, ethics or morals, the role of art in human lives, and the role of experience or reason in the development of knowledge. Philosophical fiction works would include the so-called novel of ideas, including some science fiction, utopian and dystopian fiction. So in other words, if I just wanted to stick in science fiction. So
Okay.
The next one, tech noir.
Tech noir. So like a French noir film, but in the future.
But in the future, having to do with technology. Like, for instance, I'm envisioning probably Blade Runner, something like that.
Smoking like an e-cig while a beautiful-looking android walks in your PI office.
Something along those lines.
All right.
And
That sounds fun.
of course, what has become a staple during at least one of our selections here, epic Western.
Why does that always come up?
I don't know why. It just always does. You know what? I'm going to go for tech noir.
I'm sure you were going to go with tech noir, and I bet that's going to be good. But it's also going to be easy for you to write, so I'm jealous. All right, what are my 3 options? I'm looking forward to it.
Wow, it's romantic comedy, all 3. No, I'm kidding. Oh, God.
That's fine. I'll write a romantic comedy.
I did that before I hit the generate button, and then, of course, the first 2
and
things.
what is it? What are the first 2 things?
First genre, romantic drama.
We have to be fair to our audience. Romantic drama, so it can't even be a comedy. All right.
Right.
What's the next one?
The second one is large umbrella, romance.
Romance?
Right.
And
Please tell me the third one's going to be a Western.
close. Folk tales.
Folk tales. Oh, my word. Okay.
Like, I kind of...
So we talked about folk tales in the past. That has to be something that's like, a larger-than-life story.
Yes, but remember, like, the only... I guess the one thing where we were talking about folk tales was magical realism was your thing. So, like, you couldn't choose both.
Yeah.
Because that sparked the whole question about whether or not you could have spells to do taxes and all that business.
Well, it sounds like we need to pose a question here to Aalok. We've got a question for you.
Yes,
if you lived in a gingerbread house and you sold gingerbread, would you be able to, would you have to claim that you're warehousing gingerbread if you build your house out of the gingerbread and you're planning on selling it in the future? Does that count as warehousing, or is that repurposing of your materials?
I think that counts repurposing as a material, because again, it depends on how you define gingerbread, but I think, I would say it is repurposing.
Okay. So there you go. So you can build it up and tear it down. And so anybody out there who's trying to get the tax dodge on warehousing your gingerbread, you can just keep on building small sheds in your backyard out of gingerbread. All right. On that note, I have to pick. I'm going to go with, what is it, tall tales or folk stories?
Folk tales. So yeah,
folk tales.
Folk stories. So yeah, folk stories don't necessarily have to be that. Don't necessarily have to be larger than life. Tall tales do, but folk tales can be, have you heard of the legendary story of blah 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 blah?
Okay.
All right.
I'm thinking of the Millennium Falcon doing the
Kessel Run. Yes.
The Kessel Run, and how many parsecs?
Less than 2 parsecs.
Less than 2 parsecs. Okay. Anyway, there we go. I'll pick that one. I'm done. Sorry that took too long.
That's okay. So for our random items, are we going to do have 4 pick 3, or what are we going to do?
Let's do that. Draw 4, pick 3.
Yeah,
and this is where we get the story so interesting that you can't really plan what your story is going to be before you start, because it has to incorporate one of these 3 items as a major part of the story.
Right.
Okay. So we have warm coffee cups.
Are they filled or empty?
They are merely warm coffee cups.
Okay.
So is it coffee cups for warm coffee?
It just
as opposed to like iced coffee cups?
Warm coffee cups.
And you can take that as you will. All right, moving on. I want to have some iced coffee, but this cup is just way too warm.
Delicate fashion headphones.
Oh, okay.
Not fashionable.
Fashion.
Delicate fashion headphones.
All right.
Table lamp with unique shape. Doesn't have to be, it just has to be unique. There's no guidance on this one, as there are not with any of these others. Anyway. Yeah.
And the last one.
Cosmetic brushes of different sizes.
Oh, we've had that one before.
Yes.
Cosmetic brushes.
So which 3 do you want, or which one do you not want to include?
So I have to pick 3, right?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. So I would go with warm coffee cups and table lamp with unique shape and cosmetic brushes of different sizes.
Perfect. Are you using an abacus to get this in the computer?
Yes, actually. I'm actually using a like a Smith Corona typewriter. Actually,
There you go. in binary. All right. So what are your 4 options?
My 4 options are a neat and comfortable bed.
Neat and comfortable. Usually those are mutually exclusive, but okay. Number 2?
Financial coins. So currency.
As opposed to non-financial coins. I guess that's Chuck E. Cheese. No, that's a form of currency.
Well,
Chuck E. Cheese tokens.
I think chocolate money would probably be non-financial coins.
Or those plastic doubloons that they throw at Mardi Gras. All right, what's the next one?
Elegant high heels.
Jay knows all about that. I have no idea what that means. And lastly,
by the way, you realize that like all three of the ones that I've mentioned right now have like they can like exist in a noir story very easily.
Yes,
So,
you're right.
true.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And colored gift bags.
Colored gift bags that you get after the Oscars, which we're not going to be invited to this year, unfortunately.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to pick colored gift bags.
So which are the 3 you're going to do first before you type it in?
Okay. I'm going to do colored gift bags, financial coins, and elegant high heels. Why not?
Yeah, I knew you were going to do the high heels. It's a noir.
Yep. Let's find some new things for Dick. Okay?
All right, scare me. Here we go. What do we got?
Decorative Christmas balls at Christmas.
So it's going to have to be a Christmas story in the future about folktale Christmas story.
A folktale Christmas
And
story about money problems.
All right. Yeah, that's going to write itself. All right,
Yeah,
next one.
exactly. Like, wow. Retro glasses, which would be the second time in a row that you've had a story that mentions glasses.
Mentions glasses, but not retro. We could go with that. Because, yeah, retro would be like today's glasses. It'd be like Oakley's or something.
Oh, yeah, perhaps. I'm just saying, like, just glasses. What was the other one? Was like glasses on a book. Old glasses on a book. All right. The next one is home pillow sofa.
Which one of those 3 things is the object?
I guess it's a pillow, or it's a sofa with those
Made
pillows.
out of pillows.
Well, yes, and then
So it's a very plush sofa?
Yes.
Okay. I think I know which one's on the chopping block. Okay, what's the last one?
White household air purifier.
Okay, that's just so random I'm going to use it. So let's get rid of the plush sofa, and we have was it air purifier?
Mm-hmm.
An air purifier, retro glasses, and Christmas balls at Christmas.
Interesting. Abacus at work.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Abacus at work is what I was saying.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah,
abacus
there
at
we
work.
go. All right, so I guess we
Nope,
have our
I
writing
still-
prompts.
I still have yet to finish one more of yours.
Really?
Retro glasses.
You know you can just like cut and paste, right?
Yeah, where's the fun in that?
Tick, tock, tick.
All right, we're good. I was literally, when I said where's the fun in that, we're done. So, okay.
All right, so we have our 3 writing prompts. We're going to go off the air for 4 hours. I'm going to come right back on, and we're going to read each other's stories. I'm really looking forward to this whole idea, and it's probably something that everybody can relate to at least one time in their life. Money problems. All right.
Awesome.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's do it.
Excited to work on this.
So thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you all in 4 hours.
And we are back. All right, we've had our 4 hours, and we are going to exchange our stories, and then we're going to read them and talk about them. Just a little reminder, if you like bad science fiction read poorly, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you hear our show. All right, so how was the writing experience today?
I think it was pretty interesting because although I write a lot of stories, none of them have been like as far into the future as this one. And so it kind of allowed me to think about a lot of things that I can put into it and pull from my imagination and that was a creatively stimulating exercise, I would say, because it allowed me to go into the corners of my imagination that I've not visited before, and some pretty interesting ideas emerged out of it, and I hope that it comes across in the story.
All
I'm
right.
really excited to hear that. My big question that I have for you: did this 4-hour time limit, did it actually hinder your ability to write, or did it kind of help you get those new ideas out there?
I think it really helped because as soon as we had all the details for writing the story, I kind of put it down on a piece of paper and let it marinate in my mind. And just, as I was going through my day, I felt like, okay, things will start popping up and I'll come up with like different things. And so it really helped. So I took next couple of hours to just kind of like let the ideas come to me rather than me pursuing them. And that kind of, opened up a lot of doors. So I think, yeah, that 4-hour time limit I knew is that, I have to come up with something quickly, but it's also not so aggressive of a deadline that I'll have to like, come up something in an hour or anything like that. So yeah, I think it was just about the right interval for me to develop something based on the prompts.
And that's what at least I find that I get a lot of fun out of, is that it puts you on the spot. It's just time to get your ideas out, and it is called bad science fiction, and it's also called read poorly. So the concept for us is that we're not trying to write bad fiction, but it gives you the freedom that it's okay if you have an idea that's just a little too crazy, or you didn't think about it long enough to hash out. It's fine, because the entire point is just to get those ideas that are marinating in your head down on paper, and hopefully you won't be too ashamed of them if you spent too much time thinking about it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, my process is very iterative in the sense that we kind of lay out the broad structure of like how the story is going to evolve, and then this is something that I do with my writers, like in the writers' room. It's the idea called the creative conflict, which means I deliberately pit like writers against each other. So there would be a prompt, for example. I would say one writer to like just criticize it no matter what, and then I'll pick another writer and just say nice things about it and defend the idea no matter what, and then I pit them against each other. And it's that creative conflict that kind of gives me an idea of like how we should proceed with the story. So it's that debate between them which is the source of my creative ideas, which was missing in this case, but it kind of became a good way for me to internalize a lot of ideas that I was kind of outsourcing to this creative conflict. And in a weird way, it gave me a lot of clarity about my own process. So yeah, it was an interesting journey.
That's a very interesting technique that you use. So what is it called again? The creative conflict?
Yeah, it's a controlled creative conflict.
Controlled creative conflict. I'm wondering, and this might be something I put up to Jay, do we want to experiment with that a little bit today with these stories when we're done writing it? Because one of the big pulls that I want to have, at least when we bring in guest writers, is to get good advice on how they write and their process, and to try to help our writing and also share it to the audience. What do you say, Jay?
Sure. Why not?
Okay. And Aalok, we'll let you run that for us if that's all right. Does that sound good?
Yeah, sure. I would love to see the
Absolutely.
creative conflict emerge.
Because that's one thing Jay and I are very good with, is conflict. I don't know about the creative side of things.
Yeah,
So,
I think that's pretty evident from your previous episodes.
So all this thing being said, let's come up with a good way to see who's going to read what and how we're going to do this first. I'm going to put everything on you, Aalok, our guest. Do you want to read a story first, or would you like one of us to read your story first?
Yeah, I think one of you should read my story first, because I'm assuming it's shorter than both of yours. So I think it will move quickly, but it will also kind of like, give me other person's perspective in terms of like how they perceived it. So yeah,
Okay.
I think one of you should go ahead with that.
All right. So, in my hand, in my giant jar of quarters that some people think I collect, it was just for laundry in grad school. I have another lucky quarter, and they're all lucky because they're quarters. And this is actually a special quarter from what year is this? It says 1861. Oh, there we go. It's actually a 2005 quarter, but it is a Kansas State quarter. On the back is a giant bison. It says E pluribus unum. So I'm going to say, why don't I be the bison, and we're going to let Jay be the head. We're going to flip it on whoever gets to read Alok's story. Sounds good?
Sounds good to me.
Yeah,
Here's the
sounds
coin.
good to me as well.
I'm going to toss it up in the air, catch it, and it is heads. So Jay goes first.
All right.
Interesting.
This is a reading of Aalok Rathod's An Ethereal Night. It's between 30 minutes since Sarah had been waiting for her date. With each passing moment, the idea of being stood up seemed more and more evident. She knew that it was a bad idea to go on a blind date with someone. For 2 millennia ago, but living 500 years without sex makes you do things you never thought you would do. As Sarah looked at the warm coffee cups of the couple sitting beside her table, a voice-activated hologramic menu appeared on her table, reminding her that it's been 30 minutes since she arrived. Per the restaurant policy, each patron can hold a table for only 40 minutes without ordering an item. This reminder annoyed Sarah, and she ordered a large cappuccino. "Thank you for your order," exclaimed the holographic menu. "Your order of 1 large cappuccino will arrive in 5 minutes. The menu continues. As Sarah awaits the arrival of her coffee, she is reminded of her last date. She met a guy called Gary on a DNA-based dating app called Ancestry. The app had received rave reviews for its 99% accuracy in matching you with a partner that's almost genetically compatible with you so that each subsequent generation lived longer than the previous one. She wondered if it was worth paying those extra bucks for being on Ancestry. After all, isn't every app a dating app if you're on it long enough, she wondered. Sarah felt Gary was an interesting guy as she saw a table lamp with a unique shape in his dating profile. Sarah's grandfather had the same lamp on his desk, and seeing it made her a bit sentimental, and she was really close to her grandfather who went missing under mysterious circumstances. Sarah felt like Gary might be the one for her until he showed up for the date. You see, Gary was born in the year 4806, the year when humans can finally modify DNA to encode desired features in the fetus. You need a blonde baby with blue eyes, you got it. Any number of combinations were possible. Apparently, though, there were side effects to modifying DNA that they just weren't discovered until much later. Gary had accidentally seen his dad naked when he was just 8 years old, and it instantly turned his hair white. White hairs are the result of deep trauma and cannot be reversed for genetically modified babies. Gary had uploaded fake pictures on Ancestry, but showed up with his natural white hair for the date, deeply disturbing Sarah. Just then, her train of thought was interrupted by hologramic menu again, indicating that her coffee is arriving on her table in 10 seconds. Being absolutely convinced that she had been stood up, Sarah gulped down the entire cup of coffee within seconds and proceeded to use the restroom before she made a final dash to her car. Looking at herself in the mirror, Sarah pulled out her mini makeup kit that had cosmetic brushes of different sizes to fix the mascara that has been spread all over her face as she bawled at the thought of being unlovable. She was confronted with the diametrically opposite reality of her sister, who had been happily married for close to a millennium now. What had made Sarah even more disappointed is the fact that she showed up on the blind date at the insistence of her sister. Sarah fixed her makeup and punched the mirror in anger. The mirror was shattered, but it fixed itself as it was never damaged. Sarah walks out of the restroom. She promised herself that she will never go on a date again. Just then, she bumps into a guy, and lo and behold, it's Gary. Sarah is shocked. Is the universe playing some dirty trick on me, she thought? Maybe it's not him. Maybe it's his clone. The Gary I saw had white hair, and this dude has black hair, she continued. Sarah, is that you? Exclaimed Gary. Wow, it's been so long since we last met, said Gary. Still not convinced, Sarah says, yeah, but what happened to your hair? I was counting on you not remembering it. I was counting on you not remembering it. Anywho, I fixed it. I came across this ancient technique called meditation that humans practiced in their early days. I wasn't sure, but it worked wonders, replied Gary. Sarah was surprised that her sister picked Gary of all guys for her to go on a blind date. Sarah was even more surprised that her sister knew about Gary at all. Sarah vividly remembers not mentioning her first date and only date with Gary to anyone. Sarah and Gary both grab a seat and order another round of cappuccinos. Why did my sister pick you? Sarah mumbled. What was that? Said Gary. Nothing. What have you been up to all this while? Sarah asks. Nothing crazy. I just went on a journey of self-exploration for some time. I wanted to rediscover myself. I visited the fifth dimension, and that's where I discovered meditation. It's a different world out there. Good for you, replied Sarah. So there's a classic movie called The Notebook, playing at a nearby theater. Old school romance. Would you like to join me? Asked Gary. Sure, let's go for it. The reality was Gary married another woman, but couldn't survive her marriage, and was at the cafe to meet his ex-wife. Confronted with the idea that talking to his ex-wife would resurface bad memories, Gary decided to leap at the opportunity to escape from the cafe, while also having Sarah as his date for the week. As Sarah and Gary seated themselves in their seats, Sarah asked, So how did my sister find out about you? You have a sister, replied Gary, with a puzzled look. Ah, don't worry about it. The movie is about to start, she says. The end.
Nice.
Yeah, I like it.
Thank you.
I like the turnabout there at the very end.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The finding out that it was all just chance chance in a way and all this sort of stuff. It was great.
Is this just chance? Yep.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, well.
Yeah. It's just like I wanted to kind of, mix these two people in a more sort of convenient circumstances, and I wanted to play on this angle of chance that just because things didn't work out with someone at one point in time does not mean that it will have to be the same way in future. And that is something that I feel like, was an interesting angle to explore, that, even in future, in the year 4806, when we have progressed so much, humans as a race, that they've figured out how to give features to the baby that will eventually be born, do things like luck still happen? Do things like, chances or coincidences still happen? In a world that is so technologically advanced that pretty much anything can be done through a computer program or through AI, does these human coincidences that, currently we experience right now in 2020, would they still happen in 4806? And so that's why I felt that, it would be nice to kind of explore that angle from this date, blind date scenario where you don't know who the person is going to be, and coincidentally it turns out to be the person that you have met before, and that leads to a date, whereas the actual person that was supposed to be there on the date could not make it for some reason. So it's that. So yeah.
Something else that I really like on that concept, not just that it's future and you have the technology that could round those things out, because you're talking about you have so much more knowledge in the future, you can see how the genetic codes are going to be compatible, but also the lifespan. If you're talking about
Yeah.
I'm looking at this at the beginning. So the person that she was supposed to meet was 2,000 years old. If you think
Yes.
about living 20 years, and then like when you hit 30, it's like your perception of time changes so much. Just imagine after 200 years and then maybe 2,000 years. I mean, do things like luck even mean anything anymore? When you'd think that you just experience so many things that are good luck, bad luck, all of a sudden nothing really sticks out anymore.
Yeah.
Even
Yes. So it was this sort of perception of time that, because we, like, as a millennial, we are kind of this generation that is driven by this word called FOMO, which is like fear of missing out. And to an extent, it's a good thing because, I mean, the fear of missing out makes you do things that you would otherwise not do. But I feel another interesting aspect of that is that it is driven by this idea that you will miss out on something. And so that's why you should enjoy things in present. When you live that long, like, not only it changes your perception of time, as you said, that because you've been through so many experiences, that kind of, living longer beyond a certain duration seems very meaningless, very futile. And so in that mindset, if something like this that happens that you were clearly not expecting, how that could kind of, like, spice up your life a little bit, or might give you hope in a weird way. So yeah, it's just, I kind of felt that, it would be interesting to see that, okay, when a person has been through a lot in terms of just the number of years that they live, and they see that their experiences are very different than from other people around them, how does that affect their perception of, like, time and identity and, their purpose and all of those things. So yeah, it's just like, that's why I felt that this whole genetically, matching dating app would be a good way to bring together people who would have, like, the strongest genes combination possible if they kind of, had a kid together. So yeah, that was that. And I just also felt that, okay, ancestry.com, or Ancestry, which is, like, currently this company that gives you your DNA profile, or, like, the history of your DNA profile based on, your DNA. If they choose to commercialize that data in a different way, then they would just launch a dating app. And so I just extrapolated that concept that, okay, it was like an interesting thing that all this data that these companies collect on you, how could that be commercialized in, like, deep distant future, but in a positive way, not in an exploitative way.
and that's one thing that I was thinking of, because in a way this could be a really exploitative. You could really exploit people by their genetic code. Like you're dating somebody, and maybe it was the other way around, that you meet somebody, you like them, and you're thinking about getting serious. So you swap a little bit of DNA from their toothbrush, and then you send it to ancestry.com, and then you find out that if you have kids, you might have a 25% chance of the kids having a genetic um, malady, and then all of a sudden, would that be the reason that you wouldn't want to marry that person? So that's obviously, knowing me, I always look at the dark side of everything. But it's an interesting thought, because I guess I'm so used to looking at the negative, or the dark side of the mirror, that what are these elements in technology that can actually solve big problems? It's interesting because you also talked about the genetic modification. If you have a baby and you discover as a fetus that there might be a problem, then why not just use that same genetic alteration to fix those problems early on, so the child can get born without any of those issues? So those
Yeah.
are, but in your paradigm, that's not something that you can do, because you always have these unintended consequences you'll have more problems. So the solution actually is to solve it beforehand. It makes me
Right.
wonder if you'll lose your insurance or something if you don't use the Ancestry app to pick a mate.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, it was like sort of my way to comment on this, like, this like in certain cultures, for like example, South Korea is like the global hub for cosmetic surgeries, and
Hmm.
I've known people who have gone through like very very risky uh, cosmetic surgeries to have a more desirable face, have a more desirable jawline, and like all of those things fixed by a surgeon just to get a receptionist job in South Korea. So I'm like, you stretch that concept into the future, and it's like, okay, I don't want to, go through that surgery because of not having a particular job in future. I just want to be born with it. So when you stretch that concept, like how much back can you go to get all the
Yeah.
desired features that you want, and then start there. So this was my way of kind of like, making it like the extreme scenario of like modifying human body features, where if you feel that, oh, I want my daughter to grow up to be a model, so might as well just give her blue eyes, blonde hair, or whatever the definition of beauty is in like
Hmm.
4806, and just like give that to them just as like they are being born. So you don't have to worry about it in future. She has all the perfect elements of becoming a model, or a soldier, or a business person, whatever.
And that's a real interesting take on. Well, it's not even a take. It's almost the definition of science fiction. Is if you find something in the present and you just pull it into an extreme, and you put that into a situation that people aren't too familiar with, so you can actually see both, the positive and the negative of something out of balance done in the future. So this is actually a more interesting stretch the more you just describe it to me, because these things are, cosmetic surgery, uh, genetic selection of mates. I mean, these are things that are scary to me, but presented in this way, it's not a scary concept, because let's face it, if the technology is there and the desire is there, you can't stop the future. I mean, if it's possible, it's going to happen. This amount of Botox that Hollywood people have and plastic surgery, if you can do something earlier and simpler, it's going to be it's going to be a thing that's going to happen.
Right. And it is also like sort of commentary on the kind of culture that I come from. So, of course, in India, there's this concept of arranged marriage, which means that your parents pick your partners for you. And
Hmm.
essentially, you just have to select from the options that are presented to you. And you don't have much time, in making a decision. So, you are potentially choosing your life partner in like 3 or 4 meetings, which go on for like 2 hours each. So in like 12 hours, like in a setting where you are constantly overlooked by your parents, you have to make a decision of making someone your wife or husband, which is a daunting thought, because you don't know anything about that person. You cannot ask any deeply personal questions of like anything like that. And that's an issue sometimes, because a lot of things get discovered after marriage, and it's not good for either side of the family. But then I felt that it's not only those things, like not only the concept itself is flawed in its design, but also that there are so many like layers to that, that okay, even if you
Yeah.
somehow get to know the other person, your parents might not agree with you in saying that, okay, maybe she is not tall enough, or maybe she does not have like certain physical features, or maybe she doesn't have a particular degree, and because that does not look good for us as a family, maybe we should pass on her or him and look for someone else. And so those things are quite ridiculous, and unfortunately they are part of the culture that I come from. And I realized for what it is. So I just felt that, okay, that's another thing, that you would look the other people as more equal if they are all genetically modified, which means that this is something that the parents picked for them. And of course they didn't have the choice, but at least their parents are not kind of holding them accountable for certain natural flaws that like would happen right now, where a baby could be born with a certain defect, and there would be no way to fix it. In future you have that option. And so in a weird way it might also make people a bit more accepting of each other. But yeah, that was something that I was looking to explore from that angle.
It's really interesting that you say that. I actually have a good friend of mine whose parents were from India, and she grew up here in the United States. And when it was time for her to marry, she went through that entire process. And I knew her during this time period, and she was 100% opposed to it, was really scared to death. I don't want to give too many personal details just in case she's listening. But she ended up meeting somebody that her parents was one of the options that her parents picked out. And they really liked each other because they both really quickly were on the same page of a lot of things, didn't like the process, got to know each other, and really started to like each other. I'm sure they had more than 12 hours to get to know each other because they were writing and talking on the phone and for a long time. And then I guess her parents didn't like the fact that they liked each other or something, but they tried to pull back the arrangement, and it was just something really, really silly. I mean, it's not even. I don't want to go into this specific thing that it was, but I mean, it was just like what you're saying. It wasn't like a height issue, but it was something like a medical condition that 50% of the population have, and it's not a big deal at all. And they're trying to use that as an excuse because they were worried that that their kids were liking each other too much. And now she's married, loves life. She's an author too. I probably said too much on that, but yeah. So yeah, it's very interesting that for us in the United States, knowing that, not really knowing how different cultures, just how society works. And what's interesting is we're all getting hit with the same technology at the same time, and it is changing the social construct of our lives, but it does it in a different way.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I try to kind of bring in my culture or my background or like my understanding of like this contrast in these two different places that I've lived in my life. And that just gives me like more reference points to go off of, where within like the same paragraph or same sentences, I could like, comment on like multiple things. I guess that's my gift as a writer. But no matter how good of a writer I might be, I can certainly not narrate the story the way Jay did right now.
Oh, he's been practicing. That doesn't count. He cheats.
No, I do not cheat. But anyway.
Yeah, you cheat by practicing reading. Actually, I do.
Okay.
I read Dr. Seuss really fast to work on my pronunciation, and it doesn't help.
Yeah.
So before we move on, do you mind if I ask everybody one question?
Sure.
Who here is, because this is about blind dates, everybody describe their worst blind date that they've ever been on.
So I'll go first, since I'm the one who wrote this story and I have all these ideas.
You're the one that picked it. There has to be a good story. So
there is, and this happened in California in 2016. I remember this was fall of 2016, so somewhere around like October or November. But there was this girl that I matched on Tinder, and we had a good initial conversation, and we finally, after like talking to each other for a week, decided that we should catch up. But I mean, everything was fine with her until kind of like I would pop the question of like, hey, so we should catch up for a coffee. It would be nice to see you in person. And she would like, the moment I would pop that question, she would like not be too comfortable. And I don't know for what reason, but she would always either try to change the conversation or try to put it off. But yeah, one day I was sort of surprised when she herself said that, hey, I'm getting off work early today. I would have some time before I go back home. So let's catch up. I'm like, sure, why not? So I get to like, one of the cafes, pretty similar to like, what Sarah went through. And I was waiting for her, and she didn't show up for like 30 minutes. And she kept texting me that I'm on my way, don't worry, traffic is too bad, you know how it is in LA and all of that stuff, which I understood. And I'm like, okay, yeah, it's just like one of those days where she got stuck in a bad traffic. But then what I received after that was probably the most creative excuse anybody would have ever used on someone for standing them up on a date. So she texts me like 5 minutes later that I was driving down by this freeway and then this white owl flew in front of my car, and that's a bad omen in Mexican culture. If I meet you today, then somebody in my family will die, and I don't want that to happen. So I guess, we can catch up some other time. And then from that moment on, she ghosted me, and I think, she still continues to ghost me.
That's
And it's
that's the greatest. I'm going to have to use that excuse now. Did you Google it to see if that's actually like an iconology?
I did Google it, but I guess like it was so original. Like either it was so original and that was what actually happened, or maybe she had like ran through this scenario so many times in her head that it became like her truth, and she just used it on me. But it was blind date in the sense that I had only listened to her voice, like her we matched, and like she only had like this blank profile, but what she had written in her bio was really interesting, and we got to talking and like exchanged numbers. So I mean, there was no reason for me to think that she is like some fake person, because
you mean she didn't ask you to Western Union her like $200?
No. It wasn't that. Neither like so money or wire transfer or anything like that was not involved.
I'm totally kidding.
No, I've been on like in situations where that has happened also, so I know what you're talking about. But no, that didn't happen. But yeah, I was like sitting there in that cafe, and in that moment I was like pissed off, like, okay, this is not cool. But then the very next moment, like, you gotta give props to her for her originality or creativity. So
that's awesome.
It was so impactful. It stayed with me, like, and even 4 years later, I remember it like yesterday.
All right, Jay, your turn.
What is it? So blind date stories. I really don't have any bad blind date stories, just because I don't. Well, go ahead.
Or let's set up a date that was set up.
No, actually. I've not been on a date that's been set up like that, but I have had dates where I've just made a giant fool of myself, or dates that I didn't know were dates, actually, were kind of fun.
All right, we're going to have to do a little bit of a pause for everybody. If there are any ladies listening to this program in the state of Texas,
stop it now.
We're going to have to do an experiment.
No,
and set up a blind date.
No, we're not. Stop it. Stop it.
Let's finish up, Jay. The story you were trying to tell, not the one.
Oh no, like I went to the movies with a girl once, and like something happened, and like the reel messed up or something like that. So we ended up getting our money back, and I went to go take her home, and she was like, "Huh, that was a nice date," and I was like, "Huh." Date? This minute those words left my mouth, it was like, no. It was quite entertaining.
I don't think I heard that story. So you took a girl out on the date, and
This is a long time ago. Yes, we went to a movie.
You took a girl on a movie. Yeah. Did you have dinner at all?
No, I don't think so. Actually,
did you offer?
I don't know.
Did you buy her popcorn?
I paid for her ticket, and Anyway, yeah, I know what you're trying to do. You're poking holes in my story.
Ask a girl out.
Oh, gosh.
Step 2, take a girl out. Step 3, I don't know what step 3 is. Step 4,
anyway,
it's a date.
Stop. Yeah, I get it. But the way everything was kind of like for me, it was kind of like I had been trying, and it was one of those things where it's like I'd been trying with this particular person. So like, hey, not trying to be like weird. What is it? Oh gosh, here we are. I'm just digging a hole. I was being, I was like, well, okay, whatever. She's not gonna go for a date, but whatever. Let's, we can be friends. So we started hanging out a little bit more and more and more, and then it came to this, and then she was like, she literally said, basically, this is a date, and I was like, yeah, sure it was. And then again, like I said, as I saw the words leave my mouth, it was no. What have you done?
Did you get a second date after that?
Nope.
Oh, oh, that's heartbreaking.
So
No,
it's
no. Instead, I
so
took another girl on a date after like 2 weeks later, and it was fine.
so I'm thinking to myself that you are trying to be so smooth and so cool that you legitimately took a girl out without realizing it was a date.
Yes.
That needs some props right there.
Yeah.
So I guess it's my turn now. And I too I don't think I've been on any blind dates. I've kind of been set up with a mutual friend before. But if we're going to talk about embarrassing date stories, well, there's one time that I broke out into full body hives on a first date with somebody, and that
Shit.
should have been a warning. Like it, it should have just saved me 3 years. But anyway, before then, the actual funny story. I remember being in high school, and there's this girl that I kind of liked, and all my friends were like, "Yeah, we talked to her, and like if you ask her out, like she'd say yes because she really likes you too." And I just have to preface this. She was 2 years older than me. It's high school. I was like a sophomore and she was a senior. It's one of those things. And she was like let's say the captain of the. She was like the. Oh, I'm gonna say too much, but she was really popular. So I finally like find this time, and I was like really nervous, and I asked her out, and I just saw the look on her face when I was trying to ask her out, and she looked like she was about ready to get hit by a truck, and she was trying to move out of the way, and then she very tactfully, very respectfully said, "Oh, I no, not really. I'm okay with And then come to find out that it was a giant setup by my so-called friends that they were trying to do it on purpose just to thoroughly embarrass me.
Oh, wow.
So that's my embarrassing story. But what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Yep.
True. Yeah.
All right. So let's move on. So I guess you're reading my story. And my
Okay.
story is Santa Claus.
Right. So I'm reading Santa Claus. That is written by Dick.
Yes.
Correct. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Great. All right. So Santa Claus. Great. Oh, okay. Just a quick disclaimer. I'm not as good as Jay when it comes to reading the stories. So it might seem very cold and monotonous, but bear with me as I go through this 4 pages.
Just remember, the name of the podcast is Bad Science Fiction Read Poorly.
Awesome. Okay, great. So I'm ready. Here we go. Frankie walked into the room carrying his tattered and torn stuffed sock monkey. It was old and ratty looking, but it had such a pleasant enamel, even with one of the eye buttons missing. Grandpa, Frankie asked with a pleading smile. Mr. Mitchell looked over his leather-bound book from his perch atop a plush reading chair and saw his grandson standing there in his favorite llama pajamas. Frankie, it is 9 p.m. Way past your bedtime. What are you doing up? Frankie rubbed the thick carpet with his big toe and looked over to the fireplace. It was smoldering and putting out the sweet smell of oak being toasted into charcoal. He then looked up to the ceiling and back to his grandfather. What if Santa doesn't come this year? Frankie said with a big tear in his eye. Grandpa put down his book and frowned at Frankie, but Frankie wouldn't return his gaze. Frankie, why don't you sit in my lap and tell me what you are worried about? Mr. Mitchell set down his book, took off his retro reading glasses, and turned on the air purifier to clean out the smell of the smoke from the room. Mr. Mitchell picked up Frankie and set him in his lap. Frankie, Mr. Mitchell started, do you remember the story of Santa Claus? Not the one who lived at the North Pole, but the real one? Yes, but could you tell me the story again? Frankie said with a pleading look on his face. Okay, but only if you promise to go to bed before midnight, Mr. Mitchell said with a light smile on his face and some distance in his eyes. It all started the winter of 2213. No, it was 20 years earlier, in 93, in San Francisco. A young man was born in a refugee hospital by a mother who came from Germany, and his father, Dr. Caesar Santana, was an American doctor who worked there. This was the third solar flare to hit Earth, and this was by far the worst one yet. His mom wanted to name him Klaus after his grandfather who died trying to put out the fires in the Black Forest, so his name was Klaus Santana. Before the solar flares, humanity was doing great. We had colonies on the Moon, Mars, and research stations on Titan and dirigibles circling Venus. The human population was totaling 35 billion, and the living conditions in every corner of the planet, from remote villages to the most densely populated cities, were better than they have ever been in any time in human history. NASA satellites monitoring the sun started noticing some strange readings in 2189, and massive solar flares started to emanate from the sun. Researchers were not too worried at first until an enormous solar flare emanated and reached Mars. The impact lasted for hours and destroyed the entire colony of New Tulsa. When rescue ships reached the colony, there were no survivors. Mr. Mitchell looked down at his grandson, who was shaking in his lap. You know all of the details of the solar flares, but you need to know how the world was before the flares. We had 100 years without war or famine. People and countries respected each other, and everyone was able to produce limitless amounts of resources, food, technology. It was truly the best time in humanity. After the fifth flare hit Earth, there were only 4 billion humans left. The atmosphere was destroyed, and the sun was sending out amounts of UV radiation that would burn you within 5 minutes of exposure. By the time Klaus turned 18, no one left their headline no one left their lead-lined houses for fear of being burned alive. Humanity was on the brink of collapse, but everyone was doing their part to try to last a little while longer, just in case the sun cycle reversed and we could go outside again. San Francisco was like many of the Lucky cities. The old subway and sewer systems turned into an easy way to move from building to building. Klaus was able to get a job at one of the old toy manufacturer companies, Galoob. Galoob had one of the best manufacturing facilities in the city, and although it could only construct objects out of silicone, iron, polycarbonate, and pigmentation, it wasn't accurate enough to create microchips, but it was perfect for creating any toy you could design. Before the flares, it was perfect. You could create any toy you wanted to make for pennies. The problem was now they only used it to make necessities, like cooking pots and shelters. The average age of the planet was 15 because everyone knew their children were going to be the future, but no child was playing with toys. They were being trained to do a job by computers, and they almost never left their houses. The summer of 2213 was the roughest time yet. One more flare passed near Earth and took the last little bit of the ozone layer. Crops couldn't grow without protection from the sun. Entire cities started to starve because they could not keep up with the changes in the weather. The projections were still positive that the crops would grow at the high latitudes, but there was this sense that it was futile. The scientists saw no reason for the flares to stop, and the next flare would probably make the Earth uninhabitable. "But Grandpa, how could you just give up?" said Frankie. "It was a different time then. Old rivalries started up, cities started to fight each other over food, people were thinking their neighbors were hoarding supplies, and this was just 10 years after so much prosperity. No one would have seen it coming. But let me get back to the story. Klaus Santana was working on a secret project with some of his friends. They came up with a machine that could manipulate time." Frankie's eyes lit up. "A time machine?" Grandpa Mitchell laughed. "Not exactly. The machine would make a bubble and change the speed time could pass inside that bubble. They thought they could come up with a way to grow food indoors in a single minute instead of 2 months. With this piece of technology, they could end the famine and the fight. There was a problem with the machine. It would slow down the passage of time, but when Klaus used the machine, plants wouldn't grow and people wouldn't age. They never understood the results, and they couldn't fix it. They couldn't use it to fix the famine. They experimented on ways to use it for super fast travel. They were able to mount it on a hover car, and they could fly all the way around the world. And when it landed, only 1 millisecond passed, even though they were in the air for 18 hours. But Frankie, you need to know that Klaus was not some super rich or super smart guy. He was just an ordinary person trying to do the best that he could. Klaus was able to demonstrate his project with his boss, but his boss was too afraid to go inside the bubble with him. Klaus tried an interesting experiment by stepping into the bubble, running down the block, picking up a bucket, and getting it back before exiting the bubble. He accomplished the trick and with his boss outside the bubble, but the boss was confused. He started the stopwatch when Klaus started running and saw Klaus running at a normal speed. Klaus came back at a regular speed, but when he checked the stopwatch, no time had passed. He admitted that he liked the project, but he did not see any need for it. They were producing survival needs, but people were slowly stopping to care about their own survival. That night, one of the most important events in all of humanity would take place, because that was Christmas Eve, 2213. Astronomers noticed a strong buildup of solar radiation and a dark sunspot. They predicted that in 7 days, a solar flare would form, and of all the predictions, models agreed it would be a direct hit on Earth. If this flare hit the planet, humanity was doomed. There was going to be no way to survive it, and there was no way the planet would ever come back from it. Transmissions from all over the world stopped as families gathered into their living room, glued to the TV, to would wait for the eruption to begin in the morning. Only then would they know if it would hit Earth or miss. Klaus waited in his lab all alone, thinking to himself, if this was his last Christmas, how would he want to spend it? He looked at his fake Christmas tree in the corner with all the red ball ornaments, and as he thought, he realized something. He could make children's toys out of sand, he had a flying car, and he had the ability to freeze the time and move around at will. If this was the last Christmas, he could deliver a present to every child on the face of the planet. He swore to himself that if he could, he would. He attached the Galoob Small Item Fabrication Center to his hover car and made his time bubble and set off. The night Klaus Santana visited every single address in the world, all 2 billion homes. He spent the time to talk to every family and every child and explain to them the importance of having hope. He gave each child any toy they wanted in the Galoob catalog of items under 2 square feet. He even visited my house. Really, Grandpa, said Frankie. What did you talk about? Well, we were really scared and we didn't know what to do. Then this man appeared out of nowhere. All the clocks in the house stopped all at once. He must have he must have had the same conversation millions of times, and he assured to us that no matter what, we would keep fighting. As long as we had air to breathe, we would survive. I remember I asked him what would happen if it hit us, and he smiled at me. Some things we can't control, so we should just do the best with what we have. But I'm sure I'll see you down the road. He left, and the clock started running again. The next day, the reports came out that Klaus Santana had visited every single house left on the planet and convinced everyone to keep fighting. And we put out a concerted effort to dig deeper shelters and grow even more food. But one lasting legacy but the one lasting legacy was that children started playing again, and that gave the adults hope. The New Year flare of 2014 missed Earth by 2 days, but the mood on the entire planet changed. People started singing again, children would play with each other, and Galoob went back to selling toys because there was an increased demand again. In between water bottles and survival gear, we saw it through the dark times. The sun cycle started to calm down and the flare stopped, and we were able to begin growing crops on the surface again. And for 36 years, Klaus Santana delivered a present to every child on the planet. This is why you must go to bed. If Klaus spends 1 minute at every house on the planet, it would seem like 6,000 years to him. Frankie? Frankie? But Frankie was fast asleep on his grandfather's lap. Just then, all the clocks in the room stopped. The door opened, and in walked a much older Klaus than Mr. Mitchell remembered. Klaus smiled at the two of them and pulled out a bright red fire truck for Frankie. He turned around and then stopped. "Billy Mitchell?" Klaus asked inquisitively. Mr. Mitchell laughed. "Everyone calls me William now." Klaus reaches in his bag and pulls out a brand new stuffed sock monkey and sets it down on the study. William Mitchell speaks up. "It's been a long road." And Klaus turns around and whispers, "And we are all still here. Merry Christmas." That's that's great. I think it's an interesting exploration into like why you should not lose hope, told through the story of Santa Claus. And what is interesting for me is that over the years I've realized that while Santa Claus is this nice older grandpa like figure here in the US and seen as this friendly, loving figure, in a lot of cultures like Germany and Russia, it is almost a scary figure where parents use these
Yeah.
stories of Santa Claus to scare their children into like, doing things or behaving nicely. And I didn't know that until I made some German friends, and they said that the way there is Santa Claus in the US, there is uh, a, a creature called Krampus, Kramkus, and basically Krampus is used like Krampus eats children basically. So that's the story our parents told us while growing up, and that I was wondering like, I wonder why Germans are so serious, and I realized that okay, they've been fed the stories of this child-eating creature all their lives. No wonder they are always serious. What do you think, Jay?
Yeah, I thought that was a really good story. Again, it comes down to the whole idea of using that to teach things like hope, and then of course when you start talking about situations and disasters, simply the things like kids don't have toys to play with, things like that, it really becomes like a tragedy into itself. And using that and repurposing the Santa Claus story for this was a real good feat. And also, look, your reading of this was pretty good. So I don't know what you're
Yeah,
talking about. All
I
sitting
really
there
like.
telling me, being all
Yeah.
grumpy about me reading it or anything. But hey, man, no,
Now,
you did a fine
just in
job.
case, I will say that just in case anybody listening was wondering if there's any problems, I accidentally left in a lot of misspellings because I finished up at like 7:27, like 3 minutes before the deadline. So I did not have a chance to go back and actually correct my spelling. So he did not misread any words. He was actually reading what I accidentally wrote.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm glad to know that, it wasn't too bad and you guys followed through till the end. But yeah, I mean, my stories also had a lot of punctuation and spelling mistakes. So, I mean, that's fine. But yeah, I think it's an interesting story. Again, growing up in India, we never had a figure like Santa Claus that kind of gave us hope or rewarded us for being good kids. And it's only in recent past that like people have begun to celebrate Christmas the way it is celebrated in the US, and it was seen only as like things that like Christians did once a year, and they would have their own little party with like plum cake and wine and stuff like that. Now it's like you have Santa Claus themed parties where you can go and like have fun and dance the whole night. So yeah, I think it has changed, but certainly like my grandpa never told me that Santa Claus left this for you. They were like, well, it's Christmas, and like go buy yourself some chocolates. And I went to a Catholic school in India, so like yeah, Christmas was a pretty big deal, at least at the school, and so yeah, that was sort of my only exposure to like what Christmas is and how it was portrayed to us, which was like pretty accurate. I mean, it's a Catholic school after all, so they
Yeah.
got the story right. But yeah, it's a weird feeling. You I was born in a Hindu family, and then I went to Christian school, and then most of my friends, are either Muslims or Jains. Jainism is again like a very niche religion that is in India, and it draws from like the best of Buddhism and best of Hinduism. But I mean, it's that, yeah. So you get like a taste of a little bit of everything growing up in that kind of environment. But
Absolutely.
none of them had a child eating monsters. So yeah.
Hopefully not. I mean, really. Well, I guess we are left with Jay's story here.
Yes.
Not we, I am. So let's see. So let me make sure I read the title here because I am doing this on my phone. For some reason, it's easier for me to read because I can bring it in closer. So this is the story, Completing the Pair, by Jay. I was going to call you Jerry. By Jay. Wow. All right. Here we go. Too late to be awake, let alone still at the office. Mark Lewis sat at his desk, examining the bills strewn about his desk. He let out a sigh. He was unfazed, yet something was still bothering him. Eyes bloodshot, Mark rummaged around his desk until he found the item he was really looking for, an item he swore he would throw away but never had the stomach to follow through. The item could not be found on his desk, and he coolly opened the bottom drawer of his desk. There it was, as if staring at him. It was a singular high-heel shoe, a rich garnet with scuffs and creases. The shoe had not been worn for a long time. Mark thought about taking it out of the drawer and throwing it back in the trash. No, she's never coming back, said Mark, half cynical, half self-reassuring, as he walked out of his office and down to the garbage chute in the hall. The chute opened with a glow, with a slow, steady, mournful groan. Mark sighed, closed his eyes, and dropped the shoe down the chute. The chute door groaned even louder on the way up. You said it, Mark, replied Mark, pulling a flask from his suit and taking a swig. His only hope was that the incinerator kicked in before he changed his mind again. Mark slowly lumbered back to his office and shut the door. The bottom drawer was still open, revealing a bottle of whiskey pushed towards the back. He opened the bottle, held it high. To new beginnings, he muttered to himself, putting the bottle to his lips. After a few swigs, his eyelids grew heavy. Tomorrow starts a new day. He began drifting into sleep. Mr. Lewis! Mr. Lewis! Mark! Screamed a voice. Mark woke up, the bills on his desk sticking to his face as he lifted upright in his seat. Yes, what is it? Grumbled Mark, quickly taking the bottle of whiskey and placing it back into the bottom drawer. You have a visitor. Shall I send him in? Mark figured out it was the intercom on his desk. He looked at his watch. His security had already been in for a few hours. Mark pressed the button to respond. Sure, send them in, he replied, quickly grabbing some painkillers and a bottle of water in an attempt to stop the course. Pounding headache from the night before. A woman walked through the door, quietly sitting at the chair across from his. Marky dear, how have you been? The woman asked. Oh, Marky dear me. I got a hole in my back from the last time you came into my life. Mark grunted. Mark, that was a long time ago. I would have thought that you'd be better by now, the woman replied. Some wounds never heal. What, are you here to reminisce? Why don't you get out of here and take your memories with you? Mark said, becoming more sour with every breath. It's my husband. He's gone missing, and you're the only one who can help, she began sobbing. That pencil pusher? What did he do? Run afoul of the HR department? Mark's voice was dripping with cynicism. I don't know. He's been missing for a month now. The police have been no help. Please, you're the only one that can help. She was desperate. Barbara, I don't care, so why don't you take your problems? Mark was interrupted. He comes from a rich family. Please, just help me get him back, and we'll give you whatever you want. Barbara pleaded. Mark took a look at his avalanche of bills on his desk. Barb, what you got? He asked. Well, he was working for a defense contractor on an orbital platform. He was about to take the elevator back down, and he disappeared. Barbara's tear began to subside. Then about a week later, I received this at my door. She handed a letter over to Mark. The note was old, cut-out magazine lettering. Come to orbital platform D4 to hear our demands. Mark read, placing a cigarette in his mouth. Did you already meet with them? Mark struck a match, lighting his cigarette and taking a long, slow pull. I see you finally started using our wedding gift for my father, Barbara quipped. And no, I received a video message showing a corner table and a time. She turned over a tablet over with the picture, the video, and a scan of the letter. This meeting's supposed to take place in 2 hours, Mark said. I'd appreciate you going instead, but I've got a bad feeling, said Barbara. Oh, I see. Send the ex-husband into the lion's den, eh? Mark began, putting out the cigarette, grabbing his coat. Looks like I've got an elevator to catch. Mark walked out of the room. Is it a good day, Mr. Lewis? Asked his secretary. Make sure Barbara gets out of my office, Mark replied dryly. Mark walked out into the street, using his neural implants to call for a cab. There was a brief shadow as one lowered from the skyway. Mark stepped in and closed the door. There was a ding. Traveling to the elevator hub for D4 orbital platform, a robotic voice came over the speakers as the cab whisked off into the sky. Within minutes, the cab was approaching the terminal. Orbital flight direct to D4, charge approved. The vehicle responded and immediately broke off the landing sequence to ascend to the platform. Mark looked out at the city as it quickly became obscured by clouds. Another 10 minutes, and there was a similar landing pattern at the orbital platform. Once on the platform, Mark began to make his way towards the only eatery on the station. Normally, orbital platforms were bustling with commerce, but D4 was known well in the public's imagination as a defense. Mark flashed his identification at every door. Welcome back, Mr. Lewis, each door replied every time he presented his identification. The table was the southwest corner of the cafeteria. Mark made himself comfortable and lit another cigarette while poring over the details given in the tablet. You know, those things used to kill people, said a man. Mark looked up from his reading. I know, tablets used to disrupt attention span and eyesight development to the point where we lost a whole generation, Mark replied as the man took a seat at the table. I was talking about the smoking, Mark. Are you ready to hear our demands? Asked the man. Whose demands? Maybe I'm just here to enjoy lunch, replied Mark. I was told you'd be a pain. How about we cut to the chase? The mystery man sighed. Who told you? I didn't even know I was going to be here until this morning, Mark asked. The man put a red gift bag on the table. Give this to Barb. It's got our demands. If she ever wants to see Ken alive, don't look inside. It's for Barbara's eyes only, commanded the man. How do you know I won't look when I'm on the way out of here? Asked Mark. The man stood up and walked away. Mark shrugged and made his way back to the elevator. Within 30 minutes, he was back inside his office. The bills had been organized, and Barbara was sitting on the desk waiting for him. I thought I told my secretary to kick you out, Mark grunted as he walked past to his desk chair. Barbara quickly turned to the side so she could see him from her perch atop the desk. I think I remember hearing something about that. I obviously thought you were joking, she replied. What do they want? Pretty calm for someone whose husband's missing, Mark said, putting the red gift bag on the desk. They told me this was for you. Barbara grabbed the gift bag and walked towards the door hurriedly. I will let you know what happens next, she said hurriedly. Oh, excuse me? You look like you've seen a ghost. Mark tried to get Barbara to stop, but she was out the door by the time he got up. How about that? She's already got me back to a pawn. Mark sat back and reached into his jacket for his flask. It was empty. He turned and opened the bottom drawer. The whiskey was gone, replaced with a note which read, "I need you sober for this one," punctuated with a kiss of red lipstick. Resigned to another cigarette, Mark leaned back to his chair, his fingers allowing the note to fall to the ground. Some luck, he thought, putting his feet on the windowsill while taking a long drag on his cigarette, exhaling the smoke. Using his neural interface, Mark opened a query. Files on Ken's research began to flood the neural network. The research was into the process of criticality of materials and stars. In short, it was researching supernovas. The rest of the articles were boring by comparison. The wedding announcement, a friendly co-opt to the traveler movement. Mark sat up to his chair. The travelers, as they were called, believed in abandoning Earth to live in fleets of ships amongst the stars. His neural net was interrupted. "Mark, I'm sending you what they want. I need you to take it to the coordinates on the bag. Also, your payment should be in the bag too," said Barb through her video message. There's a knock on the door. The secretary walked in with a bright pink gift bag. "What's in the bag?" the secretary asked. Mark pulled out credit coins. "Here, make sure you pay these down. Take whatever's left and apply it towards your back pay," replied Mark, standing up, grabbing his coat. "There's more than enough for my back pay. What do you want to do with the rest?" she said. "Take a vacation," Mark coolly replied, opening a filing cabinet and pulling out a revolver, placing it in his coat and grabbing the gift bag. There was a cab waiting for him as he left the building, whisking him off to a distant warehouse on the outskirts of town. Stepping out of the cab, he proceeded to the building. A man was inside with his hands up, surrounded by 2 armed gunmen and a powder. The warehouse was unseasonably warm, indicating the fusion reactor inside the generator was malfunctioning. "Here's your bag, let him go," Mark commanded. The men were startled. One moved his laser pistol towards Mark, prompting him to draw his revolver and fire. The man fell to the ground. "How about you, sport?" Mark asked. The other gunman was shocked. "You brought a revolver? The last revolver was made—" "I know, 2225, Mark interrupted, firing and striking the gunman in the chest. "It's about 1,532 years ago. I have a fondness for antiques, and it has the added bonus of being able to penetrate energy shields." You're a monster," the gunman exclaimed. "Monster, detective, savior, pawn. I can't tell the difference anymore," Mark shrugged, walking up to Ken with the bag. "There's no time. You have to shut off the machine. It's set to explode," Ken yelled. Mark changed pace, running towards an input terminal. "I told Barbara to send the deactivation key. Quick, we only have 30 seconds. Ken's voice urgently rang out. Inside the pink bag was a box. "First, enter the terminal code 0137, Kevin explained. Mark entered the code and opened the box for the key. He lost all urgency, dropping the bag and reaching into his coat to pull out and light a cigarette. He took the contents of the box out and examined it with both hands. It was a shoe, a garnet-colored high heel. Mark took a draw on the cigarette. "Well, I guess it doesn't matter anymore," Mark chuckled. "I've been a good pawn, Ken. Are you even here?" The image of Ken faded into nothingness. The fusion reactor containment breach alarm sounded. He knew a reaction this large would vaporize the Earth. "Guess it's time for the next adventure," he muttered under his breath, dropping the cigarette onto the ground and snuffing it out. The end. Question mark? Oh, man. Yeah, that's a story. You weren't kidding. You went dark.
Yeah, I did.
Go dark or go home. See, I was just threatening destroying the Earth. You actually did it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, not only is it like a dark story and something that could happen even right now if things didn't go very well, but I think, I mean, even in terms of storytelling, you had a proper structure laid out and character arcs laid out, as well as this ending of like, now you've saved the world, you can relax. But have you? No, it's the end of the world. So that kind of like thing in the very end, I think, was quite interesting. I mean, if you really work on this is like a good, solid script. I mean, this could be part one, and you can even write a sweet sequel. So yeah, pretty cool.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no, I was trying to, because again, it was a tech noir. So I wanted something to. I thought about including robots, but I was like, that's way too Blade Runner for me. So again, I just decided to just kind of follow all the noir elements that I've seen in all the or in the few instances of an actual like film noir that I've ever seen in theaters, and well, usually like at the end, it like gets up to an unrealistically like fever pitch of like importance on this character's actions. And a lot of times, even though they'll save the day, it'll be just kind of like a shrug and like a whatever. And I kind of thought that this might be fun to actually have the world end. And he got caught up in this thing that was definitely larger than him, which of course is, if I remember correctly, also kind of a film noir kind of trope. And
Chinatown.
Yeah, and it just kind of like, he got to the moment where he like realized like there's importance on what's in the box, and of course it's the second shoe, which symbolism of bye, you've been had. So yeah, it was.
I mean, the noir elements were like pretty bang on in the sense that I could actually see this whole like story, like when she comes into his office and there's a note and there's a nuclear reactor. It kind of feels, I mean, it reminded me a lot of scenes from like Sin City, and it's sort of like this black and white scenes with like certain elements that are colored, and I could like see the color on the shoes and like on his whiskey bottle, and when the cigarette, he pulls out a cigarette and smokes it. So yeah, I mean, you were really particular on the details, and I think that's what made it a more interesting read. But yeah, I mean, there is like a proper writer inside of you.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Yeah. So yeah, I'm. What is it? Okay, Dick, thoughts? Or
Yeah, it's when you're reading it, it's kind of hard to really wrap in the narrative because you're trying to communicate and try to figure out what the characters are doing. I like the idea of incorporating kind of these ideas of the future, like the whole space elevator thing. So the idea of that being a mystery thing, but I like the idea of the travelers trope. You drop that? Did you drop that in early?
No, I just wanted to.
Not trope. Sorry,
the element. Yeah, the element of the travelers. I was kind of looking for okay, I know how I want this to end. I want this to end in the incineration of the earth. So how do I get there? Well, all right. So we've got this scientist guy who's gone missing, and he's gone missing on a defense research platform. How about let's do one of those little, those quote unquote seemingly outer spacey topics, like, the guy specializes in destroying stars, and of course that plus a fusion reactor on Earth, and then being a part of the Travelers. Basically, they want to force that society. But again, I wanted it to be like something that piqued the curiosity of our main character, but I didn't want to exactly overtly say
that,
by the way, they're planning on blowing up the Earth. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it worked out really well in that element because you didn't really lay out like the importance of, this is going to be the fall guy because we need somebody to press the button because it's too important just to have like a timer on it.
Yeah.
It seems a little elaborate, and I'm trying to come up because why did those two guys have the guy?
There is a plot hole in there, and the plot hole is that, again, like in my vision of it, when I made Ken a hologram, I was kind of like, well, wait a minute, like, because in my original thought of this, I wanted Barbara to literally just kill them both and then just take off,
Yeah,
and
I
start
like
her own life. But at the end of it, I was kind of like, well, what if I just make Kent? Because I was literally doing the whole time. I wanted time for the next adventure. Like I got to that point and I was like, you know what? Let's stop here. This seems like everything else after this point seems like it's just kind of, it would muddle the point. So I was like, well, you know what? Let's go back and let's edit this to make, let me rewrite this little last section over here to make Ken a hologram. And I was like, well, that doesn't really work well, but it gets to that last point of like, well, I guess it's time for the next adventure as he, snuffs the, the cigarette out with his foot and it goes critical. Yeah. As soon as he, snuffed out the entire earth. So yeah. No, at
least he doesn't have to pay his bills.
Well, but he just paid all of them. I mean, Barbara gave him all the credits. And of course I was sitting there going, on the one hand, you could sit there and go like, well, why did she do that? Well, on the other hand, I mean, if money, I imagine that these traveler people, which I haven't really like fleshed out their ideology that much, but I imagine that money would be, kind of, or at least the agreed upon currency in the old, in quote unquote, the old way might not have any value to, space travelers like this. So I was like, well, it kind of makes sense. Giving away the family fortune seconds before it doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah. That sounds, it makes it even more noir.
Yeah, exactly.
I guess I'm almost thinking it's like what might almost be really interesting is you shoot the two holograms and you're like, haha, it'll penetrate shields. And then like the two guys like fall to the ground and then they're like, wait a second, we're not dead. No, we're all holograms,
Oh gosh. Well, so there are two ways I thought about this. One was literally having the end of Earth and then literally that being half of the story and the second half of the story being, and this was going to be weird. It was going to be a botched memory extraction attempt at a trial. So I was thinking that might be fun, but I would like that. You would like that?
Yeah.
Exactly. I was just like, because I wanted it to be kind of at the end of that for them to sit there and go, to have literally that whole thing and then a prosecutor going, and this is what happened when we tried to get his memories out. He filmed, he recorded over his neural pathways with the story of blah, 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 blah. One of the most famous noirs of the whatever, and then just kind of go through this whole thing like it was, like he was on trial for something or he was a witness to something. And,
well, I guess those eyewitness accounts aren't admissible in court.
Yeah, exactly. The idea that they tried to skip out or tried to take out the middleman. So that, in other words, the processing ability of the human being that they're asking for what they saw and just go straight for the memories. And instead, to circumvent that, they decided to, basically program movies or, reproductions of stuff to thwart everybody, and how that would definitely just ruin the criminal justice. So I was like, that would be fun. But if I had another day.
Yeah. No, I like it.
Yeah. So I felt like, that'd be great to have that whole thing and then just stop and then, have that whole operation. But I was like, once I got started and I looked at my time after I got through the first 2 hours, because I took most of the 4 hours to write this. Usually I get done with these things at 2.5 hours. And this was I was within 30 minutes to go and I was finishing this up. So yeah. And
I think that is evident in the details that you put into the story. So it's not only about, how the story proceeds forward in terms of pacing and narrative, but also the details that you choose to focus on. And so it's very visual in that regard. And it was almost like I was, as Dick was reading through it, it felt like a story unfolding in front of my eyes. Those extra hours that you put in writing really made the difference.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it. All right. So, so are we ready to go ahead and do the wrap up or?
Yes. Well, first off, we really want to thank you, Aalok, for joining us today. It was
Yes,
really
thank you.
fun writing with you.
Yes, thank you
Yeah,
so much, Aalok. It was great.
same here, guys. I mean, of course, I've heard previous episodes, and it's just like exciting to see like how you both kind of, do this show, and like your friend, as I was saying this earlier, your friendship and like your understanding of each other and your chemistry is kind of like reflected in the way you do this episode. So it was great to be a part of it, and this certainly kind of opened up new corners of my imagination. So I would be utilizing them for my stories going ahead. But yeah, thank you so much for giving me this platform to kind of share my ideas and a little bit of my thought process, and indulging me into this conversation, and having discussion about the stories and the elements that I wrote. So yeah, and it was equally fun and exciting to read both of your stories. And yeah, I just hope that with the other guests that you continue to have in future, you have like more fun, and more crazy ideas emerge out of this endeavor. So yeah, wishing you guys a lot of luck.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so much. Okay. Well, so this has been an episode of Bad Science Fiction Read Poorly. If you like Bad Science Fiction Read Poorly, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you hear our show. And if you would like to leave us a message about our show, you can find us at anchor.fm/BSFRP. We might even read it on the air.
All right. Good night, everyone, and we'll see you next week.
All right. Good night.